At 81, Pattie Boyd finally tells the truth about George Harrison. Patricia Ann Boyd was born on March 17, 1944, in the historic town of Taunton, Somerset, England. She was the daughter of Colin Ian Langdon Boyd and Diana Frances Boyd, a couple whose lives were deeply rooted in the traditions and transitions of post-war Britain. Her father, Colin, served in the Royal Air Force, and his career meant that the Boyd family lived a rather nomadic life during Pattie's childhood. They were often on the move, relocating from one posting to another, sometimes even living overseas. This constant travel gave Pattie a worldly exposure from an early age, shaping her adaptability and poise, qualities that would later become defining features of her career in modeling. After Colin Boyd's discharge from the RAF in 1953, the family finally settled back in England, marking the beginning of a more stable chapter in their lives. As the eldest child in the Boyd household, Pattie naturally assumed a nurturing and responsible role toward her younger siblings. She shared her childhood with her brother, Colin, and two sisters, Jenny and Paula, forming a close-knit bond that would endure despite the challenges of their parents' later separation. When her parents went their separate ways and later remarried, Pattie's family circle expanded even further to include two stepbrothers, David and Robert Jr., and two stepsisters, Claire and Julia. These blended family relationships exposed her to a variety of personalities and environments, strengthening her social grace and emotional intelligence, traits that would serve her well in the sophisticated and often fickle world of fashion and celebrity. Pattie Boyd completed her schooling in 1961, earning 3 GCE O-level passes, a respectable academic achievement for a young woman of her generation. However, Pattie's destiny lay not in academics, but in artistry and expression. The following year, she moved to London, then the epicenter of youth culture and creative revolution. London in the early 1960s was alive with color, energy, and experimentation, and Pattie arrived just in time to become part of this extraordinary cultural awakening. While working as a shampoo girl at Elizabeth Arden's salon, her delicate beauty, striking features, and natural charm caught the eye of a staff member from Honey magazine who encouraged her to consider modeling, a suggestion that would change the trajectory of her life forever. By 1962, Pattie Boyd had fully entered the world of fashion, and she quickly became one of its rising stars. Initially working in London, she soon expanded her reach to Paris, one of the most glamorous cities in the world. She was regularly featured in major fashion publications including Honey, the UK edition of Vogue, Vanity Fair, and the French edition of Elle. Her face also graced newspaper fashion spreads for the Daily Telegraph and the Times, marking her as one of the most recognizable models of the early swinging 60s. Her sophisticated yet youthful look captured the essence of the time, a perfect blend of innocence and boldness that mirrored the spirit of a generation eager to redefine itself. Boyd's fame skyrocketed when she appeared on the cover of British Vogue, an achievement that cemented her place among the elite models of her era. She worked with renowned photographers such as David Bailey, Terence Donovan, and Brian Duffy, figures who were instrumental in creating the iconic swinging London image. Alongside her contemporary Jean Shrimpton, Pattie embodied a new kind of beauty, fresh, natural, and effortlessly stylish. Their looks represented a dramatic departure from the carefully groomed glamour of the 1950s, instead embracing a freer, more liberated form of femininity. This transformation in style and attitude would influence not only fashion, but also the broader cultural landscape of the Western world. In early 1964, Boyd's modeling career took an unexpected turn when she worked on a television advertising campaign for Smith's Crisps, directed by Richard Lester. Impressed by her charm and photogenic appeal, Lester cast her as a schoolgirl in A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles' first feature film. It was during the filming of this now iconic movie that Pattie met George Harrison, the Beatles' lead guitarist. Their immediate chemistry blossomed into a romance that captured the world's imagination. The relationship thrust Boyd into the dazzling high-pressure world of Beatlemania, where every move she made was scrutinized by the press and public alike. Yet it also brought her unprecedented exposure, turning her into a cultural icon in her own right, and propelling her modeling career to even greater heights. Following her newfound fame, Boyd was inundated with offers. She landed more assignments for Vogue and Vanity Fair, posed for the French photographer Jean-Luc Siffe for Tatler, and appeared in a series of commercials for brands like Smith's and L'Oreal. Her combination of beauty, poise, and cool elegance made her a muse for fashion photographers and designers alike. The press often described her as by far the most glamorous of all the Beatles' wives and girlfriends, and she became the embodiment of 60s stardom. In an era when women across the world were redefining their sense of identity and style, Pattie Boyd stood as a symbol of modern beauty, one that was approachable, spontaneous, and chic. As many fashion critics noted, women aspired to look like Pattie Boyd rather than Marlene Dietrich, signaling a profound shift in cultural ideals of femininity. Boyd's popularity extended beyond modeling when 16 magazine's editor, Gloria Stavers, invited her to write a regular column titled Pattie's Letter from London. The column offered American teens a window into the vibrant London scene, covering everything from Carnaby Street fashion trends to insights into the wardrobes of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Her lively writing and insider perspective made her a beloved figure among young readers. However, the attention also brought unwanted challenges. When she began receiving hostile letters from jealous Beatles fans, George Harrison urged her to stop writing the column for her own peace of mind. Ever the creative spirit, Boyd redirected her energy into business. She teamed up with her sister Jenny, who was also a model, to open a boutique called Jennifer Juniper in London's fashionable Chelsea Market area. The shop specialized in antiques, jewelry, and artwork, reflecting Pattie's growing interest in aesthetics beyond fashion. In this venture, Pattie served as the buyer, scouring markets and galleries for unique pieces, while Jenny managed day-to-day operations. The boutique became a stylish gathering place for artists, musicians, and models of the time, symbolizing the intersection of fashion and counterculture that defined 1960s London. In her later modeling years, Boyd continued to evolve professionally. She modeled designs by the celebrated fashion designer Ossie Clark, who, along with his muse and wife Celia Birtwell, was redefining the look of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Boyd appeared on several more covers of British Vogue and participated in memorable photo shoots, including one featuring her sisters, which captured their shared elegance and natural grace. She also collaborated with photographer Justin de Villeneuve and the iconic model Twiggy for a cover shoot for Italian Vogue, marking yet another milestone in her illustrious modeling career. Pattie Boyd's romantic history reads like a fascinating chronicle of love, heartbreak, and artistic inspiration that spanned some of the most extraordinary decades in rock and roll history. Her marriages to George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and later to Rod Weston each marked a different era of her life, from the glittering height of Beatlemania to the introspective calm of later years. And together they reveal the story of a woman who lived in the eye of fame's most dazzling storm, yet managed to rediscover peace and identity on her own terms. Her first marriage was to George Harrison, the quiet, spiritually driven guitarist of the Beatles. They married on January 21, 1966, at the height of Beatlemania, in a modest ceremony at Epsom Register Office in Surrey, England. Pattie, who had been working as a model, met George in 1964 on the set of the Beatles' first film, A Hard Day's Night. She was cast as a schoolgirl fan in one of the train scenes, and the two instantly felt a deep connection. George, famously shy yet determined, asked her to marry him the very day they met. Although she initially declined, as she was dating another man at the time, George's charm and sincerity eventually won her heart. Their marriage symbolized the fusion of pop culture and fashion, as Pattie was a prominent face of the swinging 60s, and George one of the most admired musicians in the world. Their early years together were full of glamour and creativity. They lived at Kinfauns, a psychedelic dream of a home in Surrey, which became a meeting place for friends like Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, and members of the Rolling Stones. However, the pressures of fame, the Beatles disbanding, and George's growing immersion in spirituality began to strain their relationship. Pattie recalled that George's increasing devotion to meditation and his emotional distance created a rift between them. Meanwhile, temptations of fame, groupies, long separations, and the complexities of spiritual searching took their toll. By the mid-1970s, George's infidelities and Pattie's own loneliness made their marriage untenable. They separated in 1974 and officially divorced in 1977, but Pattie always described George as her first great love. Not long after her separation from George, Pattie found herself drawn into another powerful love story, one that would inspire some of the most iconic songs in rock history. Her second husband was Eric Clapton, the legendary guitarist and close friend of George Harrison. Their relationship began under complex and emotional circumstances. Clapton had fallen deeply in love with Pattie while she was still married to George, a torment that inspired his 1970 masterpiece Layla and other assorted love songs, particularly the haunting ballad Layla, which captured his anguish and obsession. Pattie, flattered but conflicted, resisted his advances for years. She later revealed that Clapton's passion was both intoxicating and overwhelming, describing how his emotional intensity bordered on self-destructive. Eventually, after her marriage to George ended, Pattie and Eric married in 1979, surrounded by friends and music royalty. Their union was a glamorous yet turbulent one. Clapton's career was flourishing, but his battles with alcoholism and infidelity created an unstable home life. Pattie often spoke candidly about how difficult it was to live with someone struggling with addiction, admitting that although there were moments of tenderness and brilliance, the relationship was marked by pain and disappointment. Songs like Wonderful Tonight and Bell Bottom Blues were born from their relationship, musical testaments to Clapton's enduring fascination with her. However, as the years went on, their marriage unraveled under the weight of substance abuse and emotional strain. They divorced in 1989, and though their love story had ended, the songs she inspired continued to immortalize her as one of rock's great muses. After years of emotional turbulence and public attention, Pattie eventually found lasting happiness in a quieter, more grounded relationship. She met Rod Weston, a property developer in the early 1990s. Unlike her previous relationships, this one was not shaped by fame or artistic intensity, but by mutual understanding and friendship. The couple enjoyed a long partnership before finally marrying in 2015, after nearly 3 decades together. Pattie has often described Rod as her anchor, a man who restored a sense of stability and normalcy to her life after the whirlwind years spent alongside 2 of the most celebrated musicians in history. At 81 years old, Pattie Boyd, the woman who inspired some of the most beautiful love songs in rock history, has finally opened up completely about her relationship with her first husband, George Harrison. For decades, the public has only known fragments of their story: romanticized headlines, song lyrics like Something, and photos of a golden couple during the height of the swinging 60s. Now, with the wisdom and distance of age, Boyd has chosen to reflect honestly on the man she once loved so deeply and the emotional complexity of their marriage. "I adored George," she admits softly. But being married to a Beatle was not a fairy tale. It was often lonely, confusing, and filled with contradictions, Pattie first met George Harrison in 1964 on the set of A Hard Day's Night, where she was cast as a schoolgirl extra. She remembered the moment vividly. George looked at me with those shy eyes of his and asked if I'd go out to dinner. I said I couldn't. I had a boyfriend. But he didn't give up. Within months, she and George began dating, and soon she was swept into the whirlwind of Beatlemania. To the world, they were young, beautiful, and seemingly untouchable, the epitome of London's mod glamour. But behind closed doors, Pattie says, the pressure of fame often weighed heavily on George. He was only 21, and the world was at his feet, but he was already searching for something more, something spiritual that fame couldn't give him. Their 1966 marriage was one of the most celebrated unions in the world of music, yet the demands of the Beatles' fame soon began to strain their relationship. George was becoming increasingly absorbed in meditation and Indian philosophy, spending hours practicing the sitar and talking about enlightenment. Pattie, though fascinated, sometimes felt left behind. He was on a spiritual path, she recalls, and I tried to follow him, but I felt like an outsider in his new world. I wanted to share his peace, but instead, I often felt shut out. As the late 1960s progressed, George's friendship with guitarist Eric Clapton added another complicated layer to Pattie's life. Clapton fell deeply in love with her, and his unrequited feelings inspired one of the most passionate rock anthems ever written, Layla. Pattie remembers the turmoil of that time vividly. I loved George, but I was confused and heartbroken. There were times when we hardly spoke. Fame surrounded us, but inside our home there was silence. George, meanwhile, was rumored to have had affairs, one of which was with Ringo Starr's wife, Maureen. That was devastating, Boyd admits. I felt like my marriage had lost its soul. Still, Pattie held on longer than many might have expected. I didn't want to give up on George, she says. He had a kind, gentle spirit when he was himself. When he played guitar or talked about God, there was a light in his eyes that I'll never forget. Yet by 1974, the emotional distance between them had grown too wide, and Boyd made the painful decision to leave. Walking away was one of the hardest things I've ever done, she reflects. Part of me still loved him deeply, but I needed to find myself again. Over the years, Pattie and George remained in contact, their relationship evolving from heartbreak into a quiet friendship. We forgave each other in the end, she says warmly. There was no anger left, only gratitude for what we shared. When George passed away in 2001, Pattie mourned him deeply, realizing that despite everything, he had left a permanent mark on her soul. He was my first great love, she confesses. I don't think anyone ever forgets that. Today, looking back, Pattie Boyd speaks of George Harrison, not just as a rock legend, but as a human being, flawed, searching, and deeply spiritual. George wasn't perfect, and neither was I, she admits. But what we had was real. It inspired music, art, and emotions that still resonate decades later. Sometimes I hear something on the radio, and it feels like he's still speaking to me through that song. It's beautiful and bittersweet. At 81, Boyd's reflections carry both tenderness and hard-won clarity. She doesn't romanticize the past, yet she honors it with a sense of reverence. Love isn't always forever, she concludes, but it can shape who you become. George taught me to look beyond the material world, to seek peace within myself. That lesson has stayed with me all my life. In finally telling her truth, Pattie Boyd reminds the world that behind every legend is a human story, one of love, loss, forgiveness, and the enduring echoes of a bond that helped define an era.